Hello everybody, Patrick Haggerty here for another episode of Aunt Patty's Lavender Hour. This is episode 14, so we're stacking them up. Episode 14 features my old friend and close friend of Lavender Country, Pat Moriarty. He's been instrumental in all of the artwork regarding Lavender Country and a whole shitload of other stuff. So we're going to talk to Pat about who he is and what he does and what his life is about. So Pat, you were born in Chicago?
Yes, I was born in Chicago. My parents were art students. I guess I'm the product of frisky art students.
Oh, I see. Well, that makes some sense, right?
And one of my brothers, Kelly, is an artist and a drummer. And my brother, Mike, is a video-oriented person. He works for the University of Iowa in the Hawkeye Sports Department. And my sister is she was a mapper, where mapping districts and stuff. It's a visual related job too. And my mom was a graphic artist, and she's retired now. And my dad was a cartoonist, and he's deceased.
Your dad was a cartoonist.
Yeah, he was a cartoonist in the Navy in the 1950s. And after he got out of the Navy, he did gag cartoons for like Navy newsletters and stuff. And after he got out of the Navy, he went to art school in Chicago. And my mom moved from Iowa, she's an Iowa farm girl, to Chicago, and then they met in art school.
And you're a cartoonist.
Yeah. I look a little bit like my dad, and my family was one of those families where I thought everybody drew all the time because we all did. And so I kind of got brainwashed.
Maybe it's genetic.
Yeah, there's probably a genetic factor there with both my parents being creative, plus the environment.
One would think.
Yeah.
Well, we won't do the nature versus nurture argument, but
It's probably a little bit of both.
The point is, you come from a tradition of art-oriented people.
Yeah, I would say so.
And you have a son who's continuing in the same vein, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, I did spawn your drummer. That's another Lavender Country connection, but it's not art related, but that happens to tie in.
Well, Jack Moriarty was episode number 1
Yep.
of Aunt Patty's Lavender Hour, and
That's my boy.
he does all kinds of things for Lavender Country, including being my drummer. So, your parents' marriage didn't last, I heard.
They divorced, I think it was in 1969 or 1970, when I was 9 years old. And so my mom basically moved us back to Iowa. And so I went from being a Chicago kid to being a farm boy on a farm.
Oh, that was a rude awakening.
5 miles from a town of 500 people. So, Iowa's more, they say Iowa has more pigs than people. I was like, where did everybody go? And where did all these pigs come from? It was like a real culture shock for a little kid.
I'll bet.
And that probably made me draw more because, being isolated on a farm. And,
what else could you do?
Yeah.
You couldn't tear up the neighborhood because there wasn't a neighborhood.
Well, we did get into some trouble, on the farm.
What kind?
Oh, my mom likes to tell stories about how we made parachutes for cats, and we got on top of the barn right there by where the wind thing is, and we tested it with weights. But then we would throw the kitten off the barn, and the parachute would go down really slow. And the cats, at first they were freaking out, but then after a while they knew they weren't going to get hurt, so they would just hang there and look around as they floated down.
Did you ever hurt one?
No.
Well, that's cool.
And
I don't have to turn you into animal cruelty.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm an animal lover. I have 2 cats now myself.
And so you finished growing up on an Iowa farm with your mom and your brothers and sisters and your grandpa, right?
Yeah. Eventually, though, we did move into Greenfield, Iowa, in town. And where I
The
went
town
to-
of 500 people?
No, Greenfield's actually 2,000. It was a big town.
That was a step up.
Yeah, the big city compared to Casey, Iowa. And we moved into town, and I graduated from high school there. And then I moved to Ames and finished my bachelor's degree at Iowa State. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in graphic design, and then I moved up to Minneapolis, got a job as a museum guard at the Walker Art Center, and I started.
Well, that was a start. It was art. The name art was in your job.
Yeah. When I worked at the Walker Art Center, I met a lot of artists. Roy Lichtenstein. I met Klaus Oldenburg. Frank Gehry, the architect. I had to watch his mom while he did a talk one time, and she told me a lot about him. And I met Dennis Hopper, the actor. It was a really great place to work.
Oh,
yeah.
Dennis Hopper was a really good actor.
Yeah, and then I freelanced. I worked for Media Loft, Custom Laboratories, a whole bunch of different media houses.
What were you doing freelancing?
I did punk rock flyers for shows. I did 45 record sleeves. I also put business slideshows together, and I made charts and graphs and cartoons. So I kind of got my start. I started doing cartooning almost like as soon as I
freelancing.
Yeah, and then also the Twin Cities Reader had a contest, a cartooning contest, and out of like 300 entries, I won first prize, and that was like my first victory as a cartoonist. And so that kind of started the phone ringing and kept me going, And
well, you've had a lot of victories since then. Just to let everybody who's watching know, he's not going to say it out loud, but I'm going to say it. Pat Moriarty is a famous cartoonist, and everybody in the cartoon world knows that. So, ta-da!
Well, it's a small cult-like fame because comics and stuff aren't like mainstream so much.
You mean like Queer Country?
Yeah.
So, after this stint in Minneapolis, what happened?
Well, I started getting published as a cartoonist by Fantagraphics Books in Seattle while I was still living in Minneapolis.
Oh.
And that's where, in Chicago, I met Harvey Picard when I went there for a comics convention, and he's a famous comics writer, and he helped me on my first story. I was a big fan of his stuff because he collaborated with Crumb. He would write autobiographical stories, and other artists would.
You mean Robert Crumb,
yeah,
the famous
he was one of his main
cartoonist.
collaborators.
Is Robert still alive?
Yep, he's still around, and he's still very productive. And, he helped me out when I had no experience at all, because when I put
Wait a minute, where did you meet him?
I met him in the offices of Fantagraphics.
Really?
Yeah,
Right here in Seattle.
Because Fantagraphics publishes a lot of his work.
Oh.
And
okay.
I was putting my very first full-length comic book together. It was kind of like American Splendor. I was doing autobiographical stories. And when Crumb was in the office, I said, Harvey Picard wrote the intro to my first comic book, and I'm working on other stuff. And I can't remember if I asked him or if he offered, but he wrote a story for me. And as far as I know, I don't think Crumb has ever written a story for someone else to draw. He usually will write his own stuff or illustrate.
Oh, he wrote a
people.
story for you to draw?
Uh-huh. It appeared in Big Mouth #1. And
so I know Big Mouth.
Yeah, so
that was a good one.
So Harvey Picard and Crumb kind of launched me as a cartoonist because I had instant street cred, even though I had not very little experience.
Well, that's fucking street cred right there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I owe those guys, and
yeah, I bet you do.
And I'm still familiar with Crumb because over all these years, He's been a contributor to Mineshaft magazine,
Oh,
and that's still a current magazine. And
yeah, I know Mineshaft.
yeah, I'm kind of an art director at large for that magazine. I help them with production work and various things. And so all these years later, I occasionally get to appear in the same publication as Robert Crumb.
Let's talk a little bit about when you met me.
Well, that's a Fantagraphics thing, because I was working there as an art director at the time, and I don't even remember how it happened, but I got solicited to do the cover to Lavender Country in 1999 when it was recognized in the Country Music Hall of Fame as the first openly gay country album. Then we decided to re-release it.
We put out a reissue.
Yeah, somebody contacted me. It wasn't you.
Paul Bainan.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And it was put to me this way. We want to put this out on CD now, and the original cover just had lettering, and so now we want some artwork. And so I was like, oh, and then, you know, I always want to listen to the thing before I want to see if I want to do it. I've done lots of record covers, but I'm not gay and I'm not into country music, but I loved Lavender Country. To me, it seemed like a punk rock album because of its protest kind of lyrics, and there was like some humor and some anger in it, like that Waltz and Will trilogy grabbed me right away, and Cocksucking Tears, and I'm like, yes, I do want to do this, you know. And then I started thinking about what should I do I wanted to keep the lettering, like from the old cover, but I have those two cowboy hats kind of humping each other that I came up with for the cover art, and you still use it as a logo.
That's turned into a...
I've seen it on tattoos, and I've seen it on bandanas and T-shirts.
It's turned into an icon. My friend Jack Grelly in St. Louis, lead guitar player, loves Lavender Country, and he tattooed the hats humping on his arm. So you've done pretty much all the artwork for Lavender Country, and you also did the artwork for our new album, Blackberry Rose.
Yep. I did several posters for you and spot illustrations and the cowboy in the closet on the back of the first CD.
Oh, that's a good one. Tell me a little bit about your travels doing art. You've been some interesting places. Tell me about 3 or 4.
Well, I've done some artist residency programs. In 2012, I went to Serbia for an event called Novo Doba. Novo Doba was, if I remember it right, was like a week-long arts event with all kinds of activities going on. Music and art shows and films and things like that. And I just made a bunch of friends there.
People don't know much about Serbia, but isn't Serbia sort of like the queen of cartooning?
Well, I noticed that cartooning was really well accepted in that area. I saw comics about how to operate the elevator, comics about how to order your food, comics about how to get your driver's license. It was a real cartoon-friendly society from what I could tell. In 2014, when they invited me back, I recommended my friend David Lasky to go there for the next year, and then the U.S. Embassy paid for his ticket, and then they said, why didn't we do that with Pat? So they tried to get me to go in 2014, and I come to find that I got rejected. And they said, we got some kind of email that said that we can't agree with some of the ideas in his artwork. And I was like,
who would have thought?
And but because I was so well received the first time, even David Lasky said this, that people really were asking him a lot about me. They said, the United States is not going to tell us that we can't have you here. You will come back. So in 2015, the Serbian government paid for my stuff, and I came back the next year.
If the Serbian government ever pays for Lavender Country to come to Serbia, I'll die and go to heaven, okay?
Well, the way things are going these days, I wouldn't hold your breath. You know, I would say that everybody's financially strapped these days.
Well, there's other reasons besides that one for not holding my breath. But I don't hold my breath about Lavender Country, or I would have passed out 40 years ago. Didn't you go to Hot Springs once?
I've been to Hot Springs 4 times. Well, there was a music arts festival called Valley of the Vapors, and because it's Hot Springs, you know.
Yeah.
And so every year they have a different artist do the poster for the event, and they have an art show at some place and participate.
Valley of the Vapors is an annual event?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so in 2013 or 2014, I can't remember, I was invited there, and I flew out there and stayed there for, I don't know, a week or something, and went to all these music events, and I had an art show.
Oh, it's a big music thing.
Yeah.
Combined.
Yeah, music and art. And so then I made a bunch of friends there, and then eventually one of the organizers became one of the city organizers, and they started their SpaCon, which is their version of a comics convention, kind of like a.
Oh.
And so I started getting invited to be a guest at that, and so I've been there a few times.
So how many CD covers, album jackets, blah blah blah, have you done?
Well, I haven't actually.
I know you've done a couple of mine.
Yeah, I haven't actually counted, but if I include 45 records, cassettes, CDs, and LPs, I'm sure it's over 200 by now.
Oh, wow.
You know, I started off with the punk rock scene in Minneapolis, and then when I moved to Seattle, I did some stuff for like Sub Pop and Estrus Records and some of the small labels around here. And then now there's Hovercraft Records down in Portland, and you know, I'm working on a record cover right now. It seems like vinyl is coming back in a way, in a small way, and so they're pressing vinyl records again. So I've been doing a few of them, and currently there's a Seattle punk band called Ball Bag, like bowling ball bag, and I did
Ball Bag.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and I did a cover for them for a CD a couple of years ago, and now they're putting out a vinyl record, and I'm penciling it today. And I just did like a little logo for this thing called Soul Candy, and it is a live stream that's going to be happening on, I think, September 19th, and it's a bunch of soul acts that are going to do a live stream for a charity food bank kind of thing, and that's it's in Ashland, Kentucky, I believe. So I just finished that the other day.
Oh,
And,
okay. Oh, we didn't talk about your animated doc. I mean, your animation.
Yeah, I had a bunch of irons in the fire before the pandemic, and one thing I did do is me and my collaborator Seth Zeichner, we made an animated short, a horror film, and it got into like 15 different film festivals, and it was, you know, won a few awards. Best animation at the Portland Independent Film Festival, and best story at the Bleedingham Horror Film Festival, and
what was the name of it?
it was called The Realm Beyond Reason. And I put it up on YouTube now because now it's gone through the festivals and stuff. But it was written by Garrett Shanley, who is the writer of the new movie Vivarium, a Jesse Eisenberg movie that just came out. It's a horror film.
So we're staggering through the pandemic.
Yeah.
But you're managing, right?
Well, I'm, you know, collecting unemployment and also trying to work as much as I can in the meantime. So, you know, I'll get by. It's like I've got a roof over my head, and I've got food in the refrigerator, and you know, so I'm optimistic.
You've got fame, darling.
That and 50 cents will get me a cup of coffee.
You can't drive. You can't take a bath in it. You can't drive it to town, and you can't take it to the bank, but you've got it. Well, we might be coming up on the the end of our time. How about if you spend the last of this little interview bragging about your son?
Okay.
That's easy, right?
Yeah. Well, that was my main art project. When Jack was born, I was working for Nickelodeon magazine, and I was working at home, and so I was kind of like a daycare dad. And so, like, between his ages of 0 and 5, my income took a big dive, and I became.
Oh, you're on diaper duty, huh?
Yeah. Well, because I lived at home, I worked at home.
Yeah.
And Lori, I guess I should say my ex-wife now. She was a sign language interpreter for the deaf, and so while she was gone working, I would be at home with Jack, and so I was the only male honorary member of Mom's Club. And I would take him to the public library for story time, and I did all the stuff that moms do. And so by the time he was 5, we had him reading, and he already was like thinking he was a musician, and we got him like a lot of start him up musical equipment, and so he became my art project at the time. I just focused on him, and it paid off because he's smart and he's a good musician. And he's a creative guy, and eventually you recruited him to play in Lavender Country, and so now he's like the Swiss Army knife of replacement musicians. You're like, I need a bass player, okay, he can play bass. I need a drummer, okay, he can do the drummers. I need a rhythm guitar player, okay, we can get Jack to do that. So like whatever it is, So I'm proud of him for that. He was going to college at the Olympic or at Evergreen down in Olympia, but because of the pandemic, it's like now it's Zoom classes. So he's got one more year of college left, but I think we're going to take a year off of school and see what
That
happens.
wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Well, I predict that Jack is going to outshine you by a long ways.
Oh yeah, I
And
do too.
me. That's what I think. If you want to talk about fame, just wait.
Oh, we're just going to be dust in the history bins,
Yeah, then.
and it'll move on to the future.
So, well, anyway, Pat Moriarty, preeminent cartoonist, friend of Lavender Country, and one of my best friends.
Yeah.